Hello and welcome back to another episode of How This Indie Dev. Today I'm joined with my illustrious guest Kyle Banks, who developed the game Farewell North, which is an emotional 3D platformer with a heavy emphasis on narrative, mood, and puzzle elements. From what I know about your story and your game development, it took you 4 or 5 years. During that duration, you quit your day job, you signed a deal with a publisher. It sold very well with a very positive Steam rating, 350 Steam reviews, I think. Plus, you launched on consoles. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive into what that process looked like and just have like a cool casual chat.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, it's awesome because I've been following your journey for a long time, and so I kind of want to dig into like some of the stuff that I don't know about your journey and like because from what I know, I think in one of your devlogs on YouTube, that's something that I didn't specify. You have like 20 or 30,000 YouTube subscribers now, all covering the development of this game. But you haven't talked a lot about your previous history for what kind of led up to the development of Farewell North. Like, what was your background before you started developing that game?
For about 12 years, I've worked as a software engineer, mostly at startups, across different fields, from fitness to automotive to solar energy, like all across the board. And I was a tech lead for the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. So it's kind of leading small teams of engineers, designing solutions to different problems we're having. Dealing with challenges of scaling systems, stuff like that. Really boring technical stuff. But I love that stuff. I love a good, coding challenge. Some deep technical challenges. That's kind of like my favorite thing to work on.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, from like the day I learned how to write like a single line of code, I was like trying to figure out how to make games with that. So I think, I was in school and we were learning Java, and I think like the first day I learned how to write like a little hello world on the command line. I went home and I made like a little tic-tac-toe. Like I was just really excited to like make games out of it. So basically all through those 12 years I was working as a software engineer, I was kind of doing games on the side, in the background. Never kind of like, basically I was having a problem that I know a lot of people have, which is like this kind of like never-ending cycle of starting a project, working on it for a few weeks really passionately, and then kind of like burning out and losing interest in it. I have this whole like graveyard of projects on my GitHub, like dozens and dozens of games that I don't even remember. I look back at them and I'm like, I don't even know when I worked on this. I don't remember it at all. But anyways, so for about 10, 12 years, that was kind of like the pattern. And then I think the big thing that changed for me was I watched David Whaley's GDC talk about 4 or 5 years ago, probably 5 years ago now, I guess. And the whole concept of no 0% days. And that kind of like, I didn't realize when he was talking about this, how big of an impact it would have, but I kind of set it as a personal challenge to myself to like, start a project and this time just keep working on it, no matter what, whether you want to work on it or not, just put in a little bit of effort every day. Whether it's like, 5 hours or 5 minutes, just like some amount of effort. And that project was Farewell North. And that just like compounds over time. And eventually the project grew. And the other thing I did was I tried to challenge myself to put myself out there and start a YouTube channel, which you mentioned. And that was like really, really outside of my comfort zone. The idea of like kind of putting myself out there was terrifying. But that was the other thing I did. And those two things together kind of, the no 0% days kind of compounded and allowed me to kind of spend 4 or 5 years on this project and finish it. And then the YouTube side of things kind of gave me like this external incentive to like not let people down. Like I'd put it out there into the universe that I was actually going to finish this game. It wasn't just something I was like quietly working on in my basement or, that no one else knew about. This is like friends and family and everyone, online kind of like knew that this was a thing. And I kind of had this like pressure not to, be an idiot, like saying I was going to make something and then not do it. Yep. So yeah, those two things kind of like were I think the deciding factor and what made Farewell North different than all those other projects that I've been working on for 10, 12 years.
That's amazing. I can resonate a lot with that. I've been telling friends and family that I want to run a marathon this year. And now I'm like, well, I'm going to look like a real dunce if I don't follow through with that. So I think there is like a lot of motivating factors to spreading that out and making things public like that. I can relate a lot to your story in that I also started as a programmer in kind of the enterprise business world. I was a software consultant making like enterprise Java applications for big like Fortune 500 companies, and learned a lot, but really wanted to shift into games. And I think that's what I think is so fascinating about your shift that you described, is that you said you have this graveyard of dozens of prototypes and projects, which I think a lot of people can relate to. But then it seemed like that turning point was deciding to, like you said, never have a 0% day. And I'm wondering, is that because this is something that I constantly struggle with too, as a self-employed game developer. How much of your work is intrinsic motivation versus discipline?
So I think there's one more thing that I kind of left out there, that I think was a big deciding factor for me, but this kind of predates Feral North quite a bit. So about 10 years ago or so, I decided I wanted to do a powerlifting competition. And powerlifting is, I didn't know it at the time, but it's very similar to making a game, because it's a very long stretch of training, all to culminate in kind of one big day. And you either see success or completely fall on your face, and then you get back to it. And it's another big, long process of training and whatnot. And the other thing that's quite similar is that, like, when you first start powerlifting, for the first, say, 6 months or so, you're making a lot of progress, and you're seeing progress every day. You're getting a little bit stronger. You're adding another rep, doing a little bit more weight, etc. But then you get 5-6 years into powerlifting, and it's like you're adding like 2 kilos over the course of a year, right? Like you've kind of reached your max, and it's like the progress really comes to a stall. And it's just not fun anymore. Like it's grueling. It's very painful. It's very demanding on the rest of your life, like in terms of diet and sleep and going to the chiropractor and like all these kind of things. Game dev doesn't have so much demand on your chiropractor budget, but it does have the same thing where you're like, you start a project and it's very exciting for the first few weeks, first few months, where you're seeing a ton of progress and you're kind of shaping and molding this like world that you're creating. But then you get 4 years into the project and it's like very incremental gains. It's very frustrating. You have like just bugs that like will not go away, or you're dealing with console ports or whatever it is, and you're not seeing that like really gratifying progress anymore. And so I think what powerlifting really taught me was like the value of determination and consistency, where there's going to be days where you really, really do not want to do it, but you need to trust yourself that like when you go in and you put in the work, you're going to feel better on the other side of it. Even if like you're not seeing the progress that you want to be seeing, or you don't have a great day, you're going to be fulfilled just through the act of doing the thing. And you're also going to have to like learn to trust yourself that some days you really do need to just like not work on the thing or go to training. And so with the no 0% days, I kind of like learned to like kind of keep things in my backlog that were like really quick wins, like change the color of something. And like whenever I had an idea of like, oh, I want to just like quickly change this thing, sometimes I would like intentionally not do it and just leave it in my backlog, write a note for myself, so that on those days where I really did not want to do anything, I would have these like kind of easy wins and I could like finish that off. And then when that was done, usually it led to like a little bit of a snowball effect where you're kind of like, well, just do one more thing, just one more thing. And it, then you kind of like find your motivation through doing the thing.
Yeah.
And then some days you really do the one thing and you're like, I can't do it anymore. Like I need to step away. But I think, powerlifting was really kind of like taught me that value of consistency and determination, and all these things being more important than motivation. And motivation is actually like a byproduct of doing something, not the like catalyst to do the thing, if that makes sense. So yeah, that was like the third ingredient, I would say, that kind of like changed things for me.
Yeah, that is so fascinating to me because, well, first, I love the sort of hack that you have for leaving low-hanging fruit in your backlog for days when you need to pick up momentum and just have easy wins. Because I've always thought about, like, I've heard people talk about the 2-minute rule, where it's like if something will take you less than 2 minutes, you should just do it immediately. But I like the idea of intentionally setting it to the side for times when you kind of want something that'll be really easy to kind of get you into the developing mindset. I don't know if I just this week posted a podcast with Nikki from My Heart Game Dev, and we talked a lot about exercise and fitness as how that relates to the life of a game developer and kind of the shared commonalities there. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about that, because it seems like working out and stressing your body does a lot of things, especially what you highlighted with learning to trust yourself, and maybe not even like thinking about work as like either like intrinsic motivation or just having like discipline to get through it, but like learning that there's delayed gratification that you become familiar with as you engage with some of these harder endeavors.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation. Actually, I was watching that today, just to kind of like get a feel for what we were going to be talking about. And yeah, it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of kind of crossover between like software development or game development and training that isn't exactly like intuitive or obvious from the outside. But I think a lot of people, well, first of all, like a lot of people I would meet at powerlifting competitions turned out to be software developers, which I just found to be like a very strange thing. But there's just something about the mentality of those two things that I think like really complement one another. And so yeah, it was really interesting to see you guys talk about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious to hear kind of what was the total timeline for the roadmap of developing Farewell North? And I guess for people who aren't familiar with the game, if you can kind of give like a brief summary of it. But I'm interested to hear sort of the evolution of the process of your design and development through the years that you were working on it.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, Farewell North is a kind of more emotional, narrative-driven adventure game. So it's not difficult in the sense of like really difficult puzzles or combat or anything like that. It's more about atmosphere, mood, and storytelling. And you play as a border collie, and you're returning home to these islands off the north coast of Scotland with your human, and you're restoring color to her world. So she's kind of dealing with the loss of a family member, and you're kind of like trying to bring joy back to her world. The design of the game went through quite substantial changes, but it also kind of like solidified pretty early. So the game actually started as a completely different idea of this little silly platformer game called Comfy Boy, where you played as a chihuahua trying to find the comfiest seat in the house. It's a very silly, like low poly, little goofy thing. And I worked on that for like a weekend, and somehow it just completely pivoted in like the following weeks. It went outside, the chihuahua turned into a border collie, it became much more emotional. The color mechanic was kind of conceived from this idea I had from a project I had worked on years ago about restoring color to the world. And it just kind of felt like a really good mix of this like kind of you're playing as like kind of a supporting role or supporting character in someone else's adventure. And you're trying to like help her on this journey. And so that kind of like concept was solidified in like the first, I don't know, maybe 3 months or so. And then I thought it was going to be like a year to the finish line, and it just wasn't. It just took so much longer than I thought it was going to. And the game evolved, and the scope kind of kept ballooning. And I brought on some more people to help out. So John Konsolakis came on to do music, and he did an incredible job. If you don't play the game, like if nothing else, go check out the music, because the soundtrack is incredible. We worked with Siobhan Miller, who's like a really legendary Scottish folk singer, to do the theme song for the game. And that was just like a real treat to work with her. We have a whole voice cast, and like it just kind of like grew and grew and grew, and that's why it took so long. But I think the biggest factor in that was like I had the kind of like core premise of you playing as a dog and a supporting character in Scotland and all that, but I didn't really know like what the game was beyond that. Like that's kind of like the theme, but it doesn't really inform the gameplay or like what you're actually going to do for like the 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 hours that you're playing this game. And so all of that, like filling out the story, filling out all the different like thematic elements, that really took a long time. And something I really learned is that like adventure games like that, you don't get much like reuse out of mechanics. So every minute of the game, you're having to create entirely new stuff, or it gets very, very repetitive. If you're making a game that's a little bit more like strategy or combat or whatever, those have their own challenges, but you do get a lot more replay value out of like the core mechanics that you're creating. So yeah, for an adventure game, it just turns out to be a very time consuming and expensive endeavor where you're constantly creating new things, new mechanics, new features, and all the audio and animations and everything that comes along with that. So yeah, it was kind of just like trying to figure out what I was actually making for a very long time, beyond that kind of core nugget of an idea.
You started with this mechanic of returning color to the world, which has this really cool looking shader effect. Did that predate your decision to make this game like emotionally deep, or like, because I'm trying to, it's, I think it's a very unique game because it kind of plumbs the depths of the human experience more than other games typically do. And I'm curious if that was something that you had in mind from the beginning, or is that something where you kind of had this visual mechanic that you, like, I can see the logical connection where it would be like, oh, we're restoring color to the world. What would that mean for a person, So how did that process go?
That's a really good question. I think it's a little bit of both. So the mechanic, like as like the technical shader effect and everything, was something I kind of had from an old project, but it was a much more literal thing where like there was like monsters that were taking color and you were fighting the monsters, and there wasn't like a lot of depth to that. It was just like what you see is what you get kind of thing. But I had this idea, and then the idea is playing as a dog and having like an adventure with your human. Something just kind of like the wires kind of crossed in my head, and I realized that like this would be a really cool thematic representation of what you're doing as the pet. Like you're bringing joy to your human's world. But I think early on, I probably didn't really trust myself to like have the storytelling or narrative know-how to like really do that justice. So I don't think it was like quite as deep when I first started. And then as the project kind of grew and I was putting more and more into it, in terms of like my time and leaving my job and everything, it kind of grew, and I kind of like started to trust myself a little bit more that like it was gonna land, like people would actually connect with this idea. And I think John Konsolakis, my composer, really like he's credited as an additional writer because he really like stepped out of the composing role and like really helped out with like a lot of like the like cinematography and the narrative beats and all this kind of stuff and the emotional beats of the game. And he kind of pushed me a lot to go further with it. And yeah, so I think I owe a lot of credit to him for kind of giving me the confidence to actually go further with it. And then his music obviously really, helped amplify the whole thing. Without music, I don't think any of it would land.
Yeah.
And so I was really fortunate to work with him on that.
Yeah. That's really cool. Did you have something that I've experienced making games is, especially coming from a technical background, I can program well, I can make features, but there's so much more that goes into everything, especially as a solo developer. The art, the music, narrative design, gameplay design, puzzle design, marketing, all of that stuff. Did you have any experience with any of those things before taking on this project? Were you learning as you went? And did you find that as you were developing those skills, it would make you go back and redo work?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So I think Feral North was really like the first project I worked on that wasn't either using 100% assets or like programmer art.
Yeah.
Feral North kind of like was the first thing where I kind of like really pushed myself to like learn how to do texturing and modeling and technical art and all these different things. And now I really love that part of it. But it was not a skill I had prior. If you look at like my first devlog, that was already a few months into trying to do this, and it just looks terrible looking back on it. So I've come a long way on that. And now it's a part that I really enjoy. In terms of like narrative, that's something I didn't really have experience with, but I've always wanted to write a book, and I've always felt like I'm a competent writer. So it's something I'll have a little bit more confidence in, but like I'd never actually put myself out there to see if anyone else agreed with my assessment there. But there are things like I really cannot do. Like music is something I'm listening to music all day, every day for my entire life, but I'm tone deaf. I would be completely lost trying to make any kind of music. I just do not have that in me. Same with animation. Like I cannot for the life of me animate anything. So that's something I need, to get help with. But yeah, things like marketing, the business side, narrative, all these kind of things were things that I at least had like belief in myself that I could figure out as I went. I think like learning how to learn is something that's extremely important, especially in game development where there's so many different disciplines. Learning like your learning style and figuring out how to learn things so you're not stuck and you're not reliant, waiting on other people to show you how to do something is extremely valuable. And I think that's something I learned pretty early on in my career that was really, really helpful with game development. But yeah, like as you're working on a project for 4 years, it's kind of like inevitable that 4 years into the project, you're going to be a lot better at things than you were on day one, right? So you're constantly going back and redoing things. And I think looking forward to my next project, I'm trying to like spend up maybe a little bit more time on like the ground foundation so I don't do that so much. I think that's easier now because like with anything, when you have a few years of experience under your belt, the progress is going to slow a little bit. You're not going to like be making leaps and bounds every month. So hopefully that'll be not so substantial this time. But yeah, for Farewell North, like if I knew everything I knew now, I could probably shave off like a year and a half of the development of the game, just not having to redo things so much. And another mistake I made that I don't know if this is something that's like super applicable to everyone in the audience, but like putting the demo out so early. I probably put the demo out like a year earlier than I should have, which meant that like you're constantly kind of like keeping it up to date because you're like not happy with the way it represents the game anymore. The tutorial is not like teaching all the mechanics that you need it to. I think the tutorial area of the game I probably redid like a dozen times, and the logic in there is just so ancient that it's like very brittle, and so it's like every time you make a little change, you're like breaking everything. There's a lot of that, and I think it's kind of inevitable on your first project, and that's maybe why a lot of the advice going around is to like make smaller games, because if you're working on a project for less time, there's less that you're gonna have to redo there. But I think it is kind of inevitable.
Yeah, I see your roadmap for this game as having like 4 major plot points. Like you start the game, and then at some point you quit your job, and then at some point you sign with a publisher, and then you launch the game. I'm interested to dive into what each of those look like, but also, are there any other major plot points that you would add to that?
No, I think that's kind of is the main kind of the highlights. The order of 2 of those is backwards though. So I signed with a publisher about a year before I quit my job.
Yep.
But I think those are like kind of the 4 big moments for sure.
Were you shopping for publishers, or were you being approached? Both?
I was being approached, which is
nice.
I don't mean to sound braggy with that, but no, I was actually really like kind of opposed to the idea of working with a publisher. I was very much against it, but I always took the call just because I think you can learn a lot talking to people, and I did talk with quite a few publishers, and there was one other that I was actually quite keen on, and it didn't quite work out. So it wasn't like a complete no. It was just like it wasn't something I was really looking for, and I was working full time, and you know, I had the income to kind of support everything I needed to do with the game, and there was just no real need to like, you know, have a big recoup and all these kind of things. I just didn't really need it. But when I spoke with Mooneye, who's the publisher of the game, there was just a lot of kind of shared experience that they had. They made a game called Lost Ember, where you play as a wolf, and it's a very emotional game. And even before, you know, we signed anything, they were, you know, providing some feedback on some very specific like quadruped character issues that are very difficult to solve. If you've not done like a quadruped characters before, it's a nightmare. Don't do it. But they were like sending me code and stuff, and it was a really cool, like informal, and they're really good people. And the deal was just kind of like very mutually beneficial. I would say it's like very atypical of a publisher deal. Like it doesn't have a big recoup. There wasn't a lot of ways that it could really go wrong, essentially. So it just kind of made a lot of sense. But I think in general, the idea of a publisher, and I did a whole video on this, but the idea of a publisher is probably something I'm not keen on doing again. I think it worked out fine for Farewell North. I don't have any regrets or anything on that. But I probably wouldn't go that route again unless like the game was really risky or had an extremely high budget and I just couldn't afford to do it myself, I'll probably be looking to go it alone.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'll probably take the call because, again, like, you can learn a lot through those conversations, and there's a lot of really good people out there working as publishers that are just great to chat with sometimes.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear how that process went, taking all of those calls. Like, what did you develop as kind of your sifting criteria to filter, oh, I think this would be a good match for me, or I'm also interested to hear what do you think would be a good match for a developer and publisher, for somebody that might be in a different position than you are?
Yeah, sure. So I will say, at the time that I think Moonai and we signed in like 2022, and I think I started talking to publishers in 2021 when I started getting a little bit momentum on YouTube and stuff. They started messaging me, but I think that was a really different time. There was a lot of money going around in 2021 that just isn't there anymore. Even after I had signed with Moonai, I was still getting emails for quite a while with people who either were too lazy to actually check if there was a publisher on Steam, or were looking to like co-publish on certain platforms or China or different regions or whatever. But that kind of all dried up probably 2 years ago, I would say. So I think it was just a different time, and there's a lot of money going around. But my criteria were, I think, like, there was like a few red flags where you could tell from like just quick chats or even the initial email from the publisher that they were looking to like really rack up the budget, because that's how, a lot of them make their money. It's just they'll make like, they'll recoup 100% and then they'll take a larger recoup until they get 200% and so on and so forth. So like it's in their best interest to like really crank up the budget as long as it's within reason and they think the game can, recoup that. So that was like a big red flag for me. Anyone who's trying to like really, really crank it up, like offering entire development teams and stuff like that, which I just didn't need. A lot of publishers were, you could tell they just like didn't do any due diligence. They were just kind of like mass emailing a lot of people, and those ones would just be like a polite no, not even taking the call. But there were some, like I said, there were some really good people working in publishing, and I did have calls with a few that were really promising, and one that I was actually quite eager to work with that fell through from their side. And yeah, it's when you're talking to like the more competent publishers, the people who are like serious and like actually did their due diligence before messaging you and whatnot, like you really have to feel it out. I don't know that there's like a binary yes no. There's definitely things like in the contract you should negotiate and look out for, but like when you're just talking to them, there's good people working in publishing, so it's like they're not all looking to screw you, and it can be hard to say no sometimes, especially when they're offering like a big advance or whatever it is.
So you're saying like a subjective vibe check is pretty important.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. But we can get into like all kinds of stuff that you should look out for in the contract that are like absolute no's that you should never sign. Like, but you're not going to know that right away, right? Like they're not going to like open with their contract. You're going to open with a conversation and playing through the demo and getting some feedback and kind of, like a vibe check, like you said. Yeah. But I think the way I think about publishers is the intent of a publisher is to de-risk your project. So you're kind of like selling the risk and in exchange for like a bit of a guarantee. So you're going to say like, I'll give you whatever 50% of the revenue. You're going to give me this briefcase of cash today. And then you kind of like take the risk and you take on the upside or the potential that comes with that risk. And I reduce my risk and keep some of the money, but potentially less money because I'm selling the upside. So it's really about like how risky your project is and how much risk you can personally take on. So if you're making a game that has like a budget that's going to like bankrupt you if the game flops, that would be a really good time to work with a publisher and to kind of offload the risk to them, because they can hopefully take on more risk than you personally can, right? But if you're making a game that's got like a really reasonable budget that's not going to like kill you if it makes $0, I just don't personally see a lot of reason to work with the publisher in that case. They're not going to market the game better than you can. They're not going to buy Facebook ads better than you can. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're really, the real service they're providing is risk removal, not marketing and QA and all these kind of things. All those things are available to you through your own contractors or to do yourself. Right. The real thing, the only thing that they can provide that you can't, is risk removal. So unless your project's really, really risky, I just don't see you needing a publisher.
wasn't it at least a little tempting when a publisher approached you and said, "Hey, we can give you your whole own development team"?
I think that might have been one of those cases where like they didn't even read the Steam page. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't remember the exact scenario, but yeah, there's quite a few of those, and then there's also like porting studios who are like, it's a bit different. They're not giving you a development team to work on whatever, but like it is kind of like tempting to kind of offload some of that stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
But you're gonna pay for it. Nothing's free with the publisher, right? Like, whether they're giving you cash or a development team, you're paying that back, not out of your pocket, but out of your game's potential.
Yeah.
So if you believe in your game and it's not too risky for you to take on, I'd rather just pay less, but pay myself for like a contractor or something, right?
Yeah.
Rather than paying like hand over fist to a publisher.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are interested in publishers too, because especially independent developers, they know how to make games, but they don't know how to market them. And I think that, you know, you're like, yeah, I could pay for my own like paid advertising, you know. So it's great that you have that mindset to be able to kind of jump into the world of promoting your game. And I want to get to YouTube too, and I know that you've done pretty well on TikTok as well, and kind of learning the marketing strategies for promoting your own game, which is awesome. But before that, I'm interested to hear how the whole process went of leaving your day job, because that is, even if you partner with a publisher, you know, you kind of alleviate some of the risk with developing the game. It's a big lifestyle change.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so in terms of lifestyle, it wasn't too much. It's just, I would say it's a little lonelier. So I was already working from home. Even before the pandemic, I'd been working from home for quite a while. So in terms of that, it wasn't really a big shift for me. It's just, I don't have any calls anymore, or very few. So it's just a lot quieter, which is really, really nice, honestly. I quite love that. But there can be days where it's a little lonely. I'm not going to lie. But podcasts like yours and other game dev YouTubers with their podcasts and all that can be quite helpful, because it kind of, this might sound sad, but it kind of feels like you're not so alone, because like there's other people kind of chatting on the side that are doing the same thing you are, and they're talking about similar things. So that kind of takes the edge off a little bit. Yep. But yeah, in terms of actually like leaving my job, that was a terrifying decision. And it was something I'd kind of been playing with for quite a while. I think I'd been talking to my wife about it for like 2 years. Not in terms of like, she was like very supportive of it. It wasn't like trying to get her permission or anything. She's amazing with that. Like she was always like, you do you, like we'll figure it out kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But it was more looking for like, do you think this is a good idea? Like, do you believe in me? Do you think like this is stupid, or you know what I mean? Yep. So kind of like trying to get a little bit like of a confidence boost there. Mm-hmm. But it kind of all came to a head in like the last year of development, where I was working for a company that had a new CEO come in, and they kind of were restructuring everything. And like the entire division that I worked in was like this like green energy division of this larger company that like was kind of an evil company. But we're working in a really, really like amazing division of this. And this new CEO came in and like cut all the green energy initiatives. And I was like, well, I'm not working for the rest of the company. Like, screw them. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to have to find a new job. But it's like the game is so close to being done. I'm so burnt out. Like my life is just so exhausting at the moment. And I was like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'll take a year off. I have the savings it'll be fine. If the game comes out and it flops entirely, it'll be a year of salary down the drain, but like not the end of the world. Mm-hmm. And I'll just go find another job. Mm-hmm. And then a year turned into like a year and a half or something. But anyways, the game came out, and thankfully it did well enough that like I can continue to do this. I have a couple years runway where I can kind of keep at it, which is amazing. I'm really, very grateful for that. But it was a terrifying decision. Even when it was kind of like, not entirely, but almost forced upon me, I was still very hesitant to do it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, but I'm very grateful that I did. It's still very stressful. Like day to day I'm like refreshing the Steam backend every day and watching my bank account and like calculating how many months I have and all this kind of stuff. So it's very stressful, and I'm sure you can kind of relate with that.
Yeah, I can definitely relate with that. And I'm interested to hear, do you see the revenue from the launch of your game across different platforms as time to continue game development? Because that's kind of how you phrased it. Is there any part of you that was like, oh, now I have this amount of money and we can invest it in like a car or a house, or sort of like elevating your lifestyle? Or is it all just like, oh no, this is separate and it's just going to be allowing me to make games?
Yeah, it's pretty separate. So just to add on to the stress, I just bought a house like 2 months prior to leaving my job. So it was like,
Nice.
yeah, just crank up the stress a little bit
Yeah.
more. But yeah, pretty much like the money that comes in from the game just stays in the business account. Like it's not going anywhere other than the next game. There's like a very tiny amount that comes out. Just I live in Scotland, and there's a certain amount I have to take out to like be eligible for a pension when I eventually retire. So there's like a very minimal amount that comes out for that. But aside from that, it's just going into the next game. Yeah, so it's very stressful in that regard, but I do see it as time, essentially. Like, I know there's like a certain amount of money I need to make each month that buys me a month on the other end, essentially. So like, if I make X amount of dollars in February, that buys me one more month, essentially. And I have like a 2.5 year lead at the moment. So that's great. I've got like 2 years guaranteed that I get to keep making games. But every month I'm like hoping that it's kind of buying another month so I can kind of like keep this going.
Awesome.
And yeah, so it's I don't really see it as like money. It's just time, essentially.
I want to know if you have a similar mindset where when I left my job, I had a financial runway to work with, and I found that it crippling is too strong of a word, but it kind of it influenced my decision making, where I was trying to fit the projects that I was working on according to this financial runway. So I'm interested to hear if for your next game that you are developing, are you trying to fit the project life cycle around what you see as like your financial runway, or do you have plans to get 2 years into it or 1 year into it and then try, you said you probably won't approach another publisher. Are you setting aside time to prototype different ideas? I'm interested how that all plays out.
Yeah, exactly that. Even when I was like finishing up Farewell North in the last year, the budget was just kept going up and up and up and up. And there was a lot of me that was kind of like trying to rein that in and like hold on to every penny I could. Because Farewell North was it was quite an expensive game to make. But it was kind of like too little too late. Like it just needed to like finish it. And if it was going to cost a bit more, that was fine. But I was trying to like start to rein things in. After the release, it became much more diligent about I became much more diligent about making sure that like every day, because you can essentially start to like see that every day has a value. Every day that you're like not working a full-time job, that you're working for yourself, there's a cost to that day. And so if you're not working towards recouping that cost or earning it from your back catalog, then you're kind of losing money and your runway's getting shorter and your dreams are coming to an end, essentially. So like you said, crippling is maybe too strong of a word, but it's approaching that, I would say. Like you're very, very conscious of what's at stake, essentially. Yeah, so after Farewell North came out, we simultaneously released on PC, Mac, Xbox, and Switch, and then I worked on the PlayStation port for a little bit longer after that, and that came out in like December. But while I was working on the PlayStation port, I was also kind of starting to prototype some ideas. I think I prototyped like 4 or 5 different, very, very different games. And I had one that I thought was like the game. And I started playtesting it with a few people. And I had like kind of a plan for when I was going to announce it at a specific event. I even told the organizer like, hey, I'm going to have this game, like hold a spot for me. And I worked on that for a few months. And then I kind of realized I didn't want to make that game. And so it's kind of like, it's nowhere near finished, but it is like playable. There's like a loop there and there's like all the systems are kind of in place and it just needs more content essentially. And I realized like it just wasn't, I was trying too hard to fit it to like a time and a budget constraint. And also like the idea of like making smaller games and all that kind of stuff, which is like the prevailing advice right now, which I largely do agree with. But I realized I was like kind of making this game to fit all these constraints and it just wasn't something I was going to be proud of or something that I felt like reflected what I wanted to be doing. So yeah, so then I was like, well, shit, like I'm 4 months into this project. I think I need to cancel it. So I did. And so then it was like, Feral North had been out, aside from the PlayStation release, had been out for like 4 or 5 months at this point. And I was like, now I got nothing to show for it. And so yeah, that kind of felt pretty bad. But I have started working on another game. I'm maybe like 6 weeks into that, and I'm feeling pretty confident about that. And it's kind of not molded as much to like a budget. There's still like there is still the harsh reality of like, if I run out of money before I finish this game, then like what am I going to do?
Yeah.
But it's hopefully not a 4-year project again. It's hopefully something that like within 1 to 1.5 years could be releasable potentially. So it is kind of like within the budget, but it's just not as tightly bound to that timeline as the other one was, and I'm feeling a little bit looser with it, and a little bit more optimistic in it. I'm just a bit more proud of it. So yeah, we'll see.
Cool. I'm excited to see what it is. I'm interested to hear if you are planning to continue putting out devlogs on YouTube, and kind of what that whole process has been like for you in terms of what you found with Farewell North that helped you get the game into the public eye, and what you want to do differently or the same this next time around.
So I think devlogs are interesting. I enjoy making them, so I'll probably continue to make them. But I don't think that they're the most efficient. They're definitely not. They're not the most efficient way to get wish lists or to get eyes on your game. Like a devlog takes friggin' forever to make compared to what else you could be doing. Like in like 5 minutes you could apply for an event that'll get 10,000 times the eyeballs that your devlog's going to get. And in say like 2 hours you can make like a TikTok that does really well, that is going to get 10 times the eyeballs that your devlog's going to get. But then meanwhile, like a devlog is going to take you like, I don't know, 20 hours something to make. Like they can be very, very time consuming if you're going like all in on the editing and all that kind of stuff. But I think what devlogs have...
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to ask you real quick about comparing views on YouTube to TikTok, because I'm not on TikTok. I don't really know that world. But in my mind, I always thought like short form content views were less quality than like long form content views. Have you found that to be the case, or is there a difference in your eyes?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And I think you can even see it like, so I'm a bit of a TikTok addict, so I'm on TikTok more than I should be. And I like to say that it's research, but it's not. It's just mind-numbing content. But the thing is with TikTok and with short-form content in general is you get familiar with certain creators and you see their stuff and you're like, oh, I like this guy, he's funny or whatever. But like you almost never remember their name or anything really about them. Whereas like there's, I don't watch a ton of people on YouTube, but all the people I do, I kind of like, it's very parasocial, but you kind of like know them, right? Yeah. Like you kind of like form this, I don't know about relationship, but you know what I mean? Like you kind of like have this like attachment to this creator and you kind of like get to know them a bit more and you actually remember their name and stuff like that. Yeah. So you definitely build like a stronger relationship on long form content like YouTube than you do on TikTok. But it's kind of a numbers game, right? Where on TikTok you can, like I said, you can put 2 hours into a video and get 5 million views on it. It's a lot harder said than done, and I've completely lost the touch. Like I haven't had a big video in a very long time, but the point is that like you can reach such a large audience that even if the conversion rate is minuscule compared to YouTube, just the numbers, right? Like it's just much more effective like that. But there's also a whole argument to be said that like TikTok doesn't convert, and I've had this conversation with a lot of other TikTok creators that have a substantial following on TikTok, launched the game and like just didn't see that come through. So yeah, it's kind of tricky. The other kind of advantage to short form content is you can repost it in multiple places. So you can make a TikTok and post it on Instagram and YouTube. Instagram's actually like surprisingly really effective and has that kind of like relationship aspect that YouTube has, I would say, where people kind of like, you kind of see the same people in your comments and you start like getting to know who they are and stuff like that. And TikTok it always just seems to be kind of like random. Instagram, you get a little bit more of that. So that's been pretty good. And I've talked with another dev, Noah, the creator of Sushi Come Home, who has had a lot of success on Instagram, and he's kind of really shifting towards that. So yeah, there's a lot to be said there. But I think devlogs, the one thing that I really do think that they have, and the reason I'll probably continue to make devlogs, is that it kind of really teaches you how to frame your game and how to like present those ideas. So like when you release a game, you have to, think about the whole presentation of it, from like the title to the capsule art to the screenshots to the trailer, all these kind of things. I think YouTube's a really good way to learn that framing and see what works and what doesn't work. Short form content can be good with that as well, but I think YouTube, because you build that kind of community, you kind of like start to get a sense for what people understand about the game, what maybe they misunderstand or don't get about the game, and you can kind of like figure out how to like fill in those blanks and stuff. So I think it is really useful for that, but it's very time consuming. Like if you don't enjoy YouTube, I definitely think you can like skip it. You don't have to do YouTube. It's not like an essential part of marketing a game at all.
Yeah.
I think it's more, something that most YouTube creators are doing as their primary thing. Like I would say that they're like a YouTuber first, game dev second.
Yeah.
For me, I'm much more interested in making the game than I am YouTube, and my YouTube is very inconsistent. Sometimes it gets views, sometimes it really doesn't get views. I've like not figured out how to really do YouTube. And my channel is like all over the place. Like it's completely scatterbrained. Like 1 minute it's a technical video, the next it's a business video, the next it's a devlog. Like it's just all over the place.
Yeah, but I'm totally your target demographic for that, because I love all of those things. So
yeah, I do too. And those are the channels I like to watch. But I think like it's not like the right YouTube strategy,
Yeah.
But yeah, I just do it because I enjoy making the videos. Sometimes I don't. But if I don't, then I just don't make one, because it's not like critical to me,
Yep.
Yeah. How about you? Why do you make YouTube videos?
Well, initially I wanted it to be kind of the marketing arm of the games that I was developing, to just kind of get it out there. But what I found is that it is an entirely separate endeavor from developing games, and it's not the best way to publicize the projects that I'm working on. But I do see a lot of value in it. The biggest thing I think has been networking opportunities. That's kind of been the biggest thing. I get to have conversations with interesting people like this. I get people reaching out to me with emails with like contract work, or publishers interested in like working on a game, and there's like a lot of invites to different programs, and more like behind the scenes stuff. So it's I think meeting people and opening different doors to opportunities has been kind of the biggest thing that I've seen. But I do see it as like an entirely separate endeavor from me making games and selling them.
Yeah, I think I started with the same idea as you, where it was like going to be the marketing side of making the games. And I mean, it's not nothing. Like it does help. It does help with that, but I think it doesn't help as much as people think that it does. Like before you start doing it. And but yeah, there's a lot of little benefits that come with it. I don't know if you do like sponsors or anything, but that can also help take a little bit of the pressure off as well. Yeah, there's like a lot of benefits to YouTube, and it is fun. You get to be creative in a different way.
Yeah.
I kind of think about it as like I work 3 weeks on the game, start to get like maybe a little frustrated with something, and then I take a week off and I work on a video, and it's like, you get to be creative in a different way, and it's kind of like refreshing. And then you come back to the game and you're feeling refreshed and you're feeling good, and there's a lot there.
Yeah, 100%. I'm interested to hear about, you mentioned showcases and paid advertising as potential sources of gaining wish lists and kind of getting your game out there. Are those two things that you value a lot when trying to publicize your game, or do you have like different things that you I know showcases can be really good. Lots of people talk about demos in the next fest, but I'm trying to form a hierarchy in my own mind of like where do I actually see the value. I've been reading some Reddit posts recently that talk about paid advertising on different platforms, and how like one person put a bunch of ads on Twitter or X, and they got like a really good return on investment for their game there. And lots of people talk about Facebook and TikTok and Reddit ads and all that stuff. So I don't know. Do you have any experience with that, or what do you kind of value the most?
Yeah. So in terms of ads, we did do a lot of ads for Farewell North. We put quite a lot of budget into that.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I'm unconvinced. I haven't seen any proof of that kind of like return on that. And there's no shade on them or whatever. Most of that was managed by the publisher. I haven't personally put any money into paid ads. I'm just like not convinced that it works, and I have, I don't know, lack the confidence to like put money into it and see what happens. I've sat on like the buy ad screen so many times, but I just like I'm like, I don't want to put like $500 into like something, and I don't have like any guarantee that that's going to come back. It's something I need to do some experimenting with, especially now that the game's been out for a while. We have like a kind of like a baseline daily rate. Like I know what the game kind of does on an average day when there's nothing going on.
Yeah.
I think now I can kind of like, better analyze whether ads actually work. Whereas, when you put a bunch of money into it on launch day, it's like, are the sales coming because we're on the front page of Steam? Or are they coming from the ad? You have no real way of knowing. The tracking on Steam just isn't very good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a little unconvinced on that. But I mean, there's so much money just in general that goes into advertising. Like it kind of must work. I just don't have the data to say that it does.
Yeah.
So it's something that's on my list to do some experimenting with. But events for sure. I think there's no denying that events are kind of like the big thing right now with games. Like everything though, it's like now everyone knows about it and everyone's crowding into them, and it seems like it's kind of slowing down a little bit. Just kind of like anecdotally, I would say like 2 years ago, it was like 50-50 if you're in an event whether it was going to get like a front page feature. Now, like this week, we're in 3 events and not a single one of them is getting one. And these are 2 of those are events that in the past had, or sorry, one of them is an event that in the past had front page featuring every single year, and now it's not. So I'm kind of wondering if Steam is like slowing down on that. And if an event doesn't get front page featuring, it's it's not going to get a lot of attention. So it's not much more valuable than like a tweet. But when you do get into events and they have a front page featuring, especially if it's a smaller event with not too many games in it, it's huge. Like it completely makes your month or whatever. So it is huge, and it's definitely worth keeping an eye on all the events, applying to everyone that you're eligible for, even if it's a little borderline whether you're eligible for it. Just apply. Hopefully you get in, and just fingers crossed it gets that front page feature, and then that makes a huge difference. There's also like the 4 seasonal sales, the spring, summer, winter, autumn sale put on by Steam itself. Those always get a front page feature, and they have a ton of games in them. But I think people specifically look out for those sales, like they know it's coming. They kind of save their video game budget for those. We recently had like a Steam daily deal, which was huge. That was the single best day of the entire game aside from launch day. So it was huge. So yeah, any kind of like those opportunities you can get to kind of get any more exposure in Steam itself is going to be better than anything else you can do. Like you cannot, like, no matter how many devlogs you make or tweets you put out or whatever, like you cannot match the attention you're going to get from a Steam front page feature. Like Steam just has so much traffic that is specifically there to buy games. You can't, there's nothing you can do that can match that. So that's definitely the most valuable thing. Even if it is getting crowded and even if it is kind of slowing down on the featuring, I would still say it's very, very worth applying to all of those and trying to get every opportunity you can. Message Valve, see if you can get a daily deal. Anything you can do to get on that front page.
That makes a lot of sense. Something that I've heard you say in your devlogs is you use this phrase, an amortization of investing into different skills, and like kind of like a, I bought a house a couple years ago, and the mortgage company gives you this amortization chart, which tells you how much of your monthly payment is going towards the principal balance of the loan and how much is going towards interest. And if you pay like a little bit extra on the principal, your amortization chart like changes drastically, where you can save tens of thousands of dollars by putting a little bit extra into the principal balance. So I thought that was a really interesting analogy, and I was wondering if you could unpack it a bit. What does it mean to amortize your skills as a developer as like a way of investing in yourself?
Yeah. So I went to school for accounting before switching to software development. So yeah, that's some old accounting terminology that's lingered around. But yeah, essentially what I mean with that is, let's say I'm trying to think of an example. Let's say you want to learn how to, so you want to market a game, right? So you could hire a PR firm and you could spend $25,000, which sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but that is a very small PR budget. So you could spend $25,000, hire this PR firm, and have them go out and try to get IGN to write about the game, try to get GameSpot to write about the game, try to get reviews from all these different people, get influencers to make TikToks about it and stuff like that. Or you could kind of invest that $25,000 in yourself. Maybe not literally like, go out and spend $25,000 learning things, but take a few weeks or whatever and really dive into marketing principles, learning all that kind of stuff, creating your channels, creating TikToks, learning what works, building a whole backlog of videos that you can post over time, building a strategy for how you're going to launch the game or whatever. This isn't the best example, but I've gotten this far with it, so I'm sticking with it. But basically, you're kind of like investing in yourself, right? And it's going to cost some time or money or both, investing in yourself. But what I mean by amortizing that is those skills and what you learn doing that carries over, right? It carries over to your next project, and it carries over to your PlayStation release and your Switch release, and carries over to your new game and all these different things that you're going to do in the future, hopefully. So you're kind of like, you're kind of paying once and reaping the benefits of that over a longer period of time, right? Conversely, if you hire the PR firm, you're going to spend $25,000 on that. And then when it comes to your next game, you have to spend $25,000 on that again. And when it comes to your next game, you're going to do that again. You're going to keep doing this over and over and over again. So that's what I mean by amortizing, is you're kind of just like spreading that cost over multiple projects, investing yourself now and reap the benefits in the long run. All that being said, it doesn't always make sense to do that. So like I said before, like no matter how hard I try, I am not going to be a good musician. I'm never going to be able to compose a game. It just makes sense for me to hire people to do that. Because no matter how much I invest in myself, it's just not something that's going to be doable. So you kind of have to, like, with a business lens, kind of like figure out when it makes sense to invest in yourself, when it makes sense to hire people, when you can actually see a return on those, kind of like amortizing that cost over the course of multiple games. Maybe it makes sense to do that. Yeah. If you don't think you're going to see that return, then maybe it makes sense to just hire people who can do it better than you can. And yeah, it might cost you a bit of money, but they're going to get a better result. So it's just kind of like a judgment call you have to make.
Yeah, I struggle with this a lot because I am somebody who wants to learn how to do everything, but I know that it's not feasible with the time that I'm allotted if I want to be making these projects and get them shipped. What do you think? Are there specific areas where music? You said music, it will be always outsourced, but are there things that you're like, okay, I've invested in myself to learn a little bit about marketing or 3D modeling, but I know enough to know what I want, but I don't want to do it myself, so I would like to outsource that as well because, I'm a very proficient programmer and that will be the best use of my time? Or how do you think through some of that? Do you see yourself staying primarily solo when developing games?
Yeah, so I do see myself staying primarily solo. I think in a perfect world, there's probably three key things I would love to hire people for. Like if I had infinite money, there's 3 people I would hire, and that would be a composer, an animator, and like a community management person.
Oh yeah.
Not necessarily like creating TikToks or whatever, but just kind of like helping to kind of engage the community and stuff and keep that going. Because I'm really terrible at that. But those are 3 things that like I just do not work for me. Animation, for example, I have tried so many times to kind of invest in myself, do a bunch of courses, really try to like figure out how to make decent animations, and I've kind of come to the realization I just do not have the eye for it. Like I can't. Every time I think I'm like, oh, this is like looks pretty good, I'll show it to someone, I'll be like, oh, that looks shit. I just don't have it. So those are 3 things I would love to have kind of like a permanent person for if money wasn't a thing. Unfortunately, money is a thing, so that's not the case. But primarily I'd like to stay solo. Like I enjoy the kind of challenge of it. I enjoy the kind of the like the whole element of like I think this is similar to powerlifting, where it's like you either make the lift or you don't, and it's kind of all on you. I kind of like that pressure.
Yeah.
There's kind of like no excuses. You either did it or you didn't, and
Yeah.
you have no one to blame but yourself. I really like that. And sorry, what was the other part of the question? There's a part I completely forgot about.
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, I think you answered it really well, but I think it's interesting to say like there is something about owning the things that you're working on and having like a stake in the outcome, because as an employee, you are paid primarily for your time and your skills, but it's not going to affect you whether you might lose your job if the whole company goes under, your department gets slashed or something. But really it's like, I've worked on games at game studios as a programmer, and I wanted the games to do well, but it's not going to really affect me whether they bomb or if they kill it in the charts. And but when you are doing everything yourself and kind of have ownership over it, I think it's it's a unique feeling that you can't get. Like it's kind of unique, I think, to find that in the workplace. Like I was trying to tell my wife, like I'm making less money than I did, but it feels different, and I think that sometimes that's hard for her to understand, which makes sense because, it's like money is money, but I think there is like a fulfillment aspect to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's just something about like, having so for me, narrative is a big thing. Like I really enjoy narrative games. I want to make narrative games. Yeah. And I think if you're working for someone else, it's very unlikely you're going to get to like write the story or come up with like the themes or like the emotional beats of the game. And so that to me, that's like the most satisfying part. So I want to have that control. But also like there's nothing better than like a really good collaborator. Like I talked about John Konsolakis and Joanne Ross, one of my voice actors. The two of them were just like so instrumental in the game. Like it would not exist without them. And so finding like those kind of key people to like work with and help you kind of like achieve this vision is also extremely gratifying. So while I say like I'll continue to work alone, like it'll probably be me like day to day alone working on the game, but like there's no way I'm not gonna like find great people like them to work with again. Because you can you can take the game so much further with some like really key collaborators if you find the right people. And there's like something just like really magic about that kind of like collaborative process that you don't get when you're alone.
Yeah. One of the last topics that I want to talk about is kind of having a critical eye, because I think one of the things that I've seen from successful game developers is that they are kind of mercilessly critical of their own projects, and they hold their work to a really high standard. And do you see yourself as somebody who's very critical of your own work, or has that standard changed as you've developed games throughout the years?
The standard has definitely changed. I think that's kind of inevitable. Or I don't know if it is, but for me anyways, it definitely is, where actually maybe this isn't inevitable. Maybe I'm just very pessimistic. But I think like I kind of always I'm pretty much like never happy with what I've made. I'm always kind of like I can be proud of it, but I can't help but see all the flaws essentially, right? So I'm very proud of Farewell North, but there's like so many things about it that I wish I had more time for or could have improved on, or whatever it is. And like a week and a half before the game came out, I was certain that it was gonna bomb. Like I thought for sure, not even financially, but just like critically or the player reception was gonna be really bad. I thought we'd be really lucky to get like 70% positive Steam reviews, because all I could see was like the flaws with it. And something that my publisher kind of convinced me to do, which I'm really, really grateful for, is we did something called mock reviews. And so this is like a service that a lot of journalists will offer, where you can kind of like, this is going to set off alarm bells, but you can like pay them to write a review of the game, but it's a private review. It's just for you. Right. You can't publish it. Like it's not for public consumption. It's just for you ahead of release to like get an understanding of how the press is going to like see the game, what they're going to nitpick on, what they're going to praise. and maybe you can fix up a few last minute things to hopefully when you actually do release the game to get real reviews, hopefully get a little bit better scores. So they convinced me to do this, and we did, and those all came back really positive. It was like, I think it was like 2 8s and a 9, and I was like blown away. I was like, okay, the first one, like maybe that's a fluke, we got lucky, but like 3 of them, like, okay, maybe there's something there. So that really like took my like released my nerves quite a bit. But yeah, like right up until that moment when like the first couple of those came back, I was like certain that the game was gonna do really, really poorly. I was like not quite at the point of like maybe we should reschedule the release date, but like panicking essentially of like what are we gonna do, like 4 years down the drain because the game's like no good. And then thankfully it's been really, really positive. The Steam reviews have been really great, and everything was fine. But yeah, so I'm very like pessimistic and hard on myself in that sense, I would say. So again, I don't know if that's inevitable, but I think to some degree, when you're working on anything creative and you're like getting better at it, you're always going to look back on yesterday's work and see like the blemishes and the things that you could have done better. And you're just, I think that's a good thing. It shows that you're like growing and you're improving and you're getting better at your craft. But something I need to do, and I'm sure a lot of people need to do, is like learn to give myself a little bit more grace and not be so hard on it. Because you have to like, you can't just keep spinning your wheels forever and work on the same thing over and over and over again. And that's when you get into like a 4-year cycle where you're like recreating the game over and over and over again because you're never happy with it. Like at some point you just got to get it out there and let it be what it is. But yeah, it's hard. It's harder. It's easier said than done.
Totally. I have do
you have that problem as well?
Yeah, but something that has helped me a lot is a meme that I saw online, and it says, if you don't, I forgot exactly how it was worded, but it was like, if you don't cringe at your previous self, then you're not growing. And I thought that was so good. I'm like, yeah, I cringe at my past self all the time. That must mean I'm growing a lot. So, but I think that is like really helpful because I have been in that mindset where I'm trying to like develop these skills and produce projects and put them out into the world, and I'm not always happy with the quality that comes from them, but just realizing that it's a process, and something that's finished is better than something that is eternally being modified. And so that's kind of how I look
for
at
sure.
it. Yeah.
Do you find that you have that with YouTube and whatnot as well?
YouTube's hard for me because I have realized that the kind of videos that I want to make don't get received very well with the audience that I have. And so like what I would love to do is make a sort of like a vlog style mixed with travel, mixed with like my lifestyle with game development, that's, and just kind of like more holistic. But what I found is when I take my camera outside, people pay less attention. And so it's usually the people, and then I do these podcasts, which usually don't get as wide of a reach, but but people really enjoy them. And I get a lot of comments that, for the core audience that likes to watch these videos, they really resonate with them. But the ones that I found like that, and I guess there is a difference between, public reception and how I personally view them. So like my favorite videos that I've put on YouTube are the ones that have some of the smallest views. Yeah.
I think I have the same situation where like, so for me, I think my channel has like a bit of an identity crisis. Like I never like know what my channel even is. Like, is it a vlog channel or like a devlog channel, or is it like a technical channel or whatever? But I know kind of like what I want it to be. But anytime I make videos in that kind of specific area, it just like, well, that's not even the case. Like, I think I've made like 4 videos that are specifically the type of video that I really want to make. And 2 of them are 2 of my best videos, and 2 of them are 2 of my worst videos. So I don't know, like in terms of views, I mean. So I just like I don't know what my channel is. So I have this like constant like cycle of doubt where I'm like, do I make what I want to make? Do I make what I think the people want me to make?
Yeah. I think it's a vicious cycle because I found that I think there is an aspect of like, you will attract people who will watch the videos that you put out. And so if you are constantly trying to go for the highest view count, you're going to be continuing the same sort of demographic of people that want to watch it. So like, I don't know if you follow Gavin, who made Choo Choo Charles. He made a new YouTube channel that's aimed just for game developers, and it's only got like a few thousand subscribers, but his content is really, really good on there. But one of the things he talks about is game dev YouTubers making devlogs versus tutorials. And he said he used to do tutorials. He got a decent following on YouTube that way fairly quickly, but then he realized that that's not who he wanted to watch his videos, and so he intentionally tried to shift the demographic of who watches his videos based off of the videos that he was putting out. So he made more like kind of high, like fast-paced devlog style entertainment videos, because that was he wanted, those are the people that would be more interested in buying his game rather than learning how to make games. So
yeah, I think I kind of have like the opposite of a lot of people, where like I want to make very technical videos,
yeah,
but then every time I do, people are like, no, stop showing code, like just make devlogs.
Yeah,
which is a kind of a good problem to have, because in terms of marketing, devlogs are definitely better than like technical videos, but
yeah,
I think I want to go in a more technical direction. And you see it with like certain channels where they have like hundreds of thousands of subs, and they're making just like the most technical, content imaginable. And I would love to kind of go in that direction, but yeah, the prevailing advice is always like, don't get too technical, make it more entertaining. And I think I'm just like, I think I need to like make a decision and be like, I don't care about the view count for the next like 12 months. I'm just going in this direction, and then 12 months from now, I'll evaluate if it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But I just haven't like had the confidence to go that far with it.
Totally. Well, my opinion is, if you see YouTube as primarily or mostly separate from your game's development, then you can do whatever you want with your YouTube channel without fear of it, conflicting with your game development process. But something that I'm trying, because I haven't done anything technical on my YouTube channel, but I've had a lot of people ask me about procedural generation in Unity because of the previous game that I made where you can generate islands. And so I'm making a little online course where I'm just going to sell it for, I don't know, 15 or $20 or something. And it'll just be like a walkthrough of my process of using Perlin noise in these 3 different use cases, and how you can use it to generate worlds. So that's kind of what I thought too, is like, if people are wanting more technical breakdowns, but it doesn't fit my current YouTube channel, then I could just start like a cheap way to get access to that, or maybe like Patreon. I saw that you started posting more videos on Patreon too, which is interesting, more behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to be on camera more.
Yeah.
Inspired by yourself and a few other YouTube channels. I'm noticing that like the channels that I tend to watch are people who are on camera. I don't know why. It's just something about it's more interesting to me, I guess, like subconsciously. So I'm trying to be on camera more, but I'm like terribly camera shy.
Oh yeah.
And as soon as like the little light on the camera goes on, I just like break down and don't know how to like do anything.
Yeah.
But I had the same problem like way back when I first started making YouTube videos and TikToks and stuff like that. Like I couldn't record if anyone else was home. I had to be like, very specific situation, and like it would take me like 50 takes to get anything done. But over time, like you just get more comfortable with it, and hearing your own voice, you don't care anymore. Like,
yeah.
Like I'm sure you remember like probably the first time you edited your own voice, it was like a nightmare, and you're like, I can't believe I sound like that. Why did it make that noise? Why does my mouth make that? Yeah. And now you just like probably don't care, right? Yeah. Like, so yeah, so I'm using Patreon as kind of a way to like get more comfortable being on camera. So I'm just like, I don't care if I make a fool of myself and I'm like really awkward or whatever, because it's a much smaller audience. It's much easier for me to deal with that. So I've been doing like every 2 weeks I do a kind of bonus video on Patreon, mostly with me on camera, and just trying to like get comfortable with that, and then hopefully that carries over to YouTube as well.
That's awesome. And it's so funny that you say that too, because I was watching your YouTube channel and going through some of your previous videos, and I thought, maybe I should be off camera more, because I was just thinking about how good your videos are, and thinking how much hassle I could save myself if I just like record my screen instead of like turning on a camera.
That's so funny, because I was I thought the exact same thing. I was like, I could save myself so much hassle if I'm on camera, because then I don't need so much like B-roll and like
Oh, yeah.
filler footage. Because like my least favorite part of making YouTube videos is going and getting all the footage. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what is wrong with me. I cannot record footage as I'm going.
Yeah.
Like, I always tell myself after every video, I'm like, okay, next time I'm like recording as I go,
Yeah.
and then I'll make the devlog and you have all this footage to do it with. But I never ever actually do it. So
Yeah.
I always write a script and then I have to go back and collect, you know, tons and tons of footage. And I hate it. It's like my least favorite part. So it's like if I'm on camera, then like that fills in a lot of the gaps, and I don't need to like scramble to find something to put on the screen.
Yeah.
So it's really funny that you had the exact same thought in the opposite direction.
Yeah, totally. That's really fun. Yeah, because in my mind, I'm like, okay, like, how's my lighting? I need to clean up my office. Like, I had like a bunch of stuff on the desk behind me. I'm like, I need to clear that off. You know, if you looked at the ground right now, you would just see like trash everywhere in my office because I'm like trying to clean it up. So it's pros and cons, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. So one thing, after Farewell North came out, I moved into this little closet. It's a very tiny little space, but it's like very cozy and whatnot. And I kind of like repainted and set it up exactly how I want it. So like my camera and my lights and my mic are all like ready to go.
Nice.
It used to be I would have to like rearrange my desk, move all this furniture, get to like a decent spot, and it would still be super echoey. And then I have to like set up all my lighting and shit. It would take like, half an hour to get going. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but like it's just enough to like prevent you to want to do it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So then you don't do it. But now it's like, I literally have to just click 3 buttons, and everything's like running and sounds good and looks good, decent anyways, enough to like start recording. So that's been a huge help. It's just like having everything ready.
Yeah, that I should probably invest in that, because as it is right now, it's like I use my phone for my camera, and so it's like I have to get my phone, put it on a tripod, plug it in, and like kind of like it's always very precarious. I'm like trying not to bump my desk because it's like I just balance stuff and it's all scuffed. But
I have maybe a bit of a problem. I have like so much video equipment that I don't need, but I have like multiple cameras and lights and box lights and key lights and all this kind of stuff, and like mic arms and all this kind of stuff. Like I really don't need to have, and it's like drastically overkill. But I constantly think that like the reason my stuff's echoey or whatever is because like I need this extra thing. So it's a bit of a problem, but
I really want to invest in like a nice camera, but I'm trying not to make any big purchases. But my justification is that, and I posted this on my Patreon, but I haven't talked about it publicly yet, but I'm going to Iceland soon, and I'm going to be doing like a really fun collaboration video there and doing some sort of competition while I'm traveling around there. So I think it's
cool.
It'll be basically just me, but I'm gonna be traveling around Iceland, shooting some cool footage and doing some game development. So
very cool.
I'm on the
Have you
fence
been to
about
Iceland before?
Never been on my list.
It's amazing. It's a magical place.
The land of fire and ice.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. I think you'll love it.
Cool. Yeah, I'm stoked for it.
Nice.
Cool. That's all the questions that I had. Is there anything that you wanted to go over before we wrap things up here?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. Well, it's been a blast. Thank you for coming on to this podcast. I really enjoyed our chat. Yeah, I'll link your YouTube channel and a link to Farewell North in the description below. Is there anything else that you want to plug, or places that people can find you, or what you're doing?
No, I think YouTube and is probably the main place right now. I haven't been posting much anywhere else, so yeah.
Cool. Thanks again. It's been a lot of fun.
Cool. Thanks, Thomas.